So I'm talking a little bit about FAIRmat and NOMAD in general as an introduction to the user meeting before we get on to some more detailed talks about use cases, and then we get on to some hands-on workshops and so on in the afternoon. So first, what is FAIRmat and what is NOMAD? So I think probably a lot of you have heard about it already, but FAIRmat is an NFDI consortium. So this is the National German Research Data Infrastructure Initiative. So this has funded a lot of different projects in a lot of different fields, and we are then for the condensed matter physics, and we are trying to make your research data fair. And we try to do this in an open source way, so all of our software is open source, everything we provide is open, and the idea is to promote open science and to do this in a bottom-up approach. So the idea is that we are not the ones who impose whatever you are supposed to do, but we learn from what people are doing and we help people doing, and then we bring that together into this consortium on FAIRmat. And in FAIRmat we have around 60 PIs, and then we have 30 central co-workers. So here's a picture from, I think, one of our older project meetings. And this is a little bit different from how the other consortia are running. So we are really running in a small centralized hub, more sort of like a startup, where we are really developing these software tools for our users. And this hub that we are working in is in Berlin, in Adlershof. Here is the CSMB. And here we have office space for around 40 people, seminar rooms and so on. And we work really from there as a team on site. And we also have some extra offices that are available for collaborators. So maybe one of you guys, if you have interest, if you want to come for a short period of time to really intensely start your work with NOMAD, then this might be a possibility, so you can reach out and we can discuss this. And then we can really have people on site and help you out and so on. So this has been very, very successful. Okay, so this was all FAIRmat, and what about NOMAD then? So FAIRmat is the NFDI consortia, and we are developing the software called NOMAD, right? And that's what we're here to learn about today during the users meeting. We're hopefully all users or will soon be users of NOMAD. And this is this web-based software for fair research data management. And NOMAD is a lot older than FAIRmat. So NOMAD was created already in 2014 as a repository for computational data, mainly density functional theory data. And this has already been very widely accepted in the field as an established repository where people can upload data. And then in 2021, we started this FAIRmat initiative to extend what was in NOMAD and what NOMAD was capable of. Just a brief introduction of what is NOMAD here, right? What is NOMAD at the start? So what it is that it is a repository where if you go to nomadlab.eu, you get to this page, and here you can search through a lot of different material calculations. And now also some experimental data, right? And you can search through this by different filters, and it's very performant. And once you select some of these filters, then it scales down, and you can navigate through the data. And then in the end, you get this list of results. So here we have filtered it down because we're looking for some materials. And then we see these results here, and we can navigate to these entries. And in these entries, we have a standardized way of viewing the data, where we get some information about the material. Further down here, we have some information about the electronic properties of what was calculated here and so on. And all of this is built on a structured data set that's behind this. So if we move to the data tab here, then we see that all of this is based on a hierarchical structure where all the data is stored, and this can all be queried through the API, and all of it is stored in a structured and queryable way and machine readable way. But this was what was already there, sort of. We are extending this. And what we are trying to do in addition to this is that, of course, we are extending the types of calculations and also the codes that we support in theory calculation. But we're also trying to move towards synthesis, experimental characterization, and also different types of use cases that combine all three of these things. So first, a little bit about what we're doing in theory and computation. So here we are now supporting more than 70 different codes, GW, DMFT, molecular dynamics. We are adding custom workflows so that you can define the workflow of how your simulation code is running, and we will go more into that in the afternoon. So Joe, the coordinator of Area C, will give a little hands-on session on how you can create these custom workflows and so on. And then the main thing is this drag and drop functionality, right? So the idea is that you can just take whatever computational code data that you have from your software, you can dump it in NOMAD, and NOMAD will understand this code and extract all the data into a normalized view that is compatible with all of the other data that is already there. And then you can publish it, and by doing all of this, you then get fair and AI-ready data that you can then look through with some AI toolkits that we have for looking through your data, but also other people's data and comparing this. And one example of where people have sort of implemented this is this thing called Crystal LLM. So this was a publication not affiliated with FAIRmat, but where users were uploading input and output files to NOMAD from the different codes, and they put this on NOMAD. And then NOMAD makes the data fair by this extraction that I was talking about, so by extracting the data. And then these people here, by Antunes here, they built what they call the Crystal LLM. So they are using an LLM to learn from the data in NOMAD to, based on just the formula, suggest crystal structures based on this, right? And you can use this as the input structure for your new calculations, right? That would then go into NOMAD. So the idea here is that we get this full fair life cycle, and this is just an example of how this has been used. And then if we move on to the other areas here, then synthesis, characterization, and use cases. Here we started in FAIRmat in the second year here by releasing a first official NOMAD version 1, where we introduced the support for what's called ELN, so electronic lab notebooks. And this is something that you really need for synthesis experiments, because often the data is not all there, right? It's not like a calculation code where you have all the information in the code, but the user needs to add information as they go along in an electronic lab notebook. We also added support for Nexus, which is a data standard for primarily for Newton and X-ray sciences, but it's also going into further and going into other fields of characterization and experimentation. And then we also added this North, which was the NOMAD Remote Tools Hub, which I will show a little bit about later. So this was the first step in 2022, and then in 2023, we also added support for something that we call NOMAD Oasis. We added more software like CAMELS, which is a control software that you can use in your lab if you are trying to create data. And then the idea is that you create data fair already from the beginning, and that you don't need to then later go into NOMAD to do this step. So what do I mean by this NOMAD Oasis? Maybe some of you are aware of it, but the idea here is that NOMAD is the central archive repository that we have. This is what was founded in 2014, right? Where you can upload your code, you can publish this code, and it can be available for all the other users. NOMAD Oasis lets you run the exact same software that we are running on our servers locally at your universities or at your institutes. And this means that you can then customize your Oasis, you can customize your NOMAD installation to tailor your needs that you have. And you can also do things like, so there are the sharing here, you can do automation of the data and things like this. I'll show a couple of these things. So the one thing that you can automate or you can customize is these ELNs, these electronic lab notebooks. So these allow you to create forms like this, and this could be very simple things like just a description box where you can put some data and some text and some images, but you can also create these fields here and even generate plots and visualizations. And these have then units where NOMAD understands, so you can change the unit and it gets updated, and you can generate plot based on data and things like this, right? So it's a very structured electronic lab notebook compared to maybe some other ones that exist out there. And this really allows the users to put their data in a structured way so that you can later on query it, compare it with theoretical data, and so on. Another thing that you can do is that you can automate what happens when users put in data into their ELN. So here, for example, is an example of a solar cell EQE, which is an external quantum efficiency. So someone has made a measurement here. Here's a column with some values, and they can just drag and drop this into the ELN field. And when they hit save, there's some automation here which calculates certain things. So here it calculates what is called the Urbach energy, which is the onset of the absorption in a semiconductor material. And again, here, all of these values are understood by NOMAD, so you can query by them, and they're not just some text in a box in a Word document, but they are really queryable data that is structured and ordered in there. Yeah, so that's the automation part. Another thing that the NOMAD Oasis allows you to do is that it allows you to deal with very large files. So on the central Nomad, we allow quite large files to be published, but if you're starting to talk about things like microscopy, where you might be talking about hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes of data, then we cannot, it's just not feasible to push that data over the internet, right? So what we do then is, since Nomad is just basically mounting on top of a file system that allows you to access these files, you can put these heavy files where you have them, and then you can use some clever APIs in Nomad. So this is the H5 web viewer, which lets you slice the data and access the data as you want to access it. So these single slices are not so big. The whole file can be very, very big. But since you're only accessing parts of the data at a time, the user can then navigate through the data as part of their Oasis. And they don't need to move this heavy data around, and they don't need to download it to their computer to do the analysis, but they can already see all of this directly on the web, on the Oasis. And then another thing that you can do is this North that I mentioned before. So North stands for Nomad Remote Tools Hub. And what this does is that it allows you to mount software into Nomad so that you can run directly on this file system that I mentioned before and directly access your data without having to move it around. And the most basic example of this is just running a Jupyter notebook, so that you can run your Jupyter analysis or your Python analysis, where it's R or Julia or whatever it is, directly on the server, accessing the data directly on the file system, so that you don't need to collect heavy files over the API, and that you can run the data directly there. And in addition, the analysis itself becomes more fair because it's also stored in Nomad, and it can be indexed, and you can search for this analysis later and share it and so on. But it's not just limited to Jupyter. So in principle, anything that you could run in a web OS, you can run inside of here, right? So here are things like Fiji, for example, or PyIron. You could run these directly mounted onto your Nomad Oasis and access this data. And I'll show a little example of this later in some examples. So that's the North, and it looks like this. Here you have the different tools, and you can extend this when you customize your Oasis to add more or less information there. And then the final thing that I will tell you about is these search apps here, or maybe something about sharing later. The search apps, and this allows you to visualize your data in a dashboard, right? So that once you start to upload entries, lots of different entries, you can create custom search apps which let you navigate through these entries in the same way that I was showing you before, but you can select what is going to be there, what sort of figures are going to be there, what plots you want to have, what are your metrics that are interesting for your field. And it's very useful for example, group leaders that want to have a overview of, okay, what's happening in the group, right? What are all of the calculations that are being done? What are all of the experiments that are being done? And you want to get an overview of this. But it's also useful for the individual researchers when they want to later on find the different data that they have uploaded. And the last thing is this sharing selectively. So what the Nomad Oasis allows you to do is that you can have your data locally, right? And you can have that behind a firewall, which means that you can put all of your data. We do allow in the central Nomad to publish data with an embargo. But usually in the beginning, you first have just your data locally and you see what you upload. And then the idea is that you can later on federate this and push it into the central Nomad. So here, for example, you can select co-authors or reviewers, and you can even use groups so that you can set up a group for a certain research group, and then you can just share it with all of them. And this ties into what I was just saying here now about the federated data infrastructure. So the idea is that we have the central Nomad repository here, right, where we have all of the data that's available, the classic Nomad. And then we have all of these different Nomad Oases, which are out at the different institutes and so on, where they can manage their data locally. And then we have this partial data transfer that you can then initiate once you publish it. And we already have some successful stories of this when it comes to computational data. With the experimental data, we are still working on how we are going to deal with the custom ELNs and things like this, but we are getting there. And this is not just in Germany, right, but this is also worldwide. So we have Oases running all over the world at the moment. So this all over the world brings me onto the next thing that we had to tackle in our story of Nomad, and that's the scalability, right? How do we scale Nomad from something that is just running centrally for some computational groups to something that's running worldwide for a lot of different users for a lot of different fields? And this is what we tackled mainly in 2024. So there's two things that we did here. The one thing is what we call the plugin mechanism, which allows the users to inject Python code into Nomad that creates all of this automation and things like this that I showed you before, so that you can customize your Oasis. And the second thing is that we introduced our Discord forum, which has been very successful. And this is a way where users can help each other, and we can also help users directly when they have questions, when they have issues with Nomad and so on. I'll flash a little banner later where you can register for this, and this is something that I highly recommend. But so about these plugins. So this is figures that are actually a little bit out of date, so they're from February. But we have these Nomad plugins that you can create, and there are some different versions of them. You can create parsers, you can create schema packages, and then you can create these search apps. There are also these example uploads and normalizers. And you can see here that most of what people have created are parsers and schema packages. And this is really something that is ongoing, this development of these plugins. And what I think is really cool is that we have, I think now there are a lot more, but in February there was 127 different public plugins, and only 50 of them are from FAIRmat, right? Which means that we already have a huge amount of external users which are contributing to the Nomad source code through these plugins and modifying these things. Yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit the history of Nomad. So I want to now show you some use cases in the last couple of minutes of what have people done with Nomad, right? What are some things that people do? And the first thing I want to show are some curated data sets that we have collected, right, from different types of fields and put into our central Nomad. So the first one is a solar cell example. So we use this publication of the perovskite solar cell, where some researchers, actually including me, went through a bunch of different papers and digitized data on perovskite solar cells. And we have now created a custom search app for this in Nomad, where the users can then filter through all of this data using the same thing, but there are some customized fields here, right? So you can search for example, for the transport layers here, which are something specific for solar cells, right? And then you can filter through all of these. So now here it's reduced now. Originally, I think there's almost 50,000 solar cells that are in the database. Another example is from heterogeneous catalysis. So here we have currently more than 1,500 entries, and this is a similar effort where we have basically taken a data that is already there, and we've created a custom schema. We have created a search app and a visualization so that people can see what are the sort of things that they can do. And this you can already see if you go to nomadlab.eu. You can already navigate and find these examples and have a look at them. And here you again have some custom dashboards where you can look through all these different types of catalysis reactions, and there are specific filters for this sort of field. Another example is from electron microscopy, from EBSD. So here, Markus Kubach in our team, he was scraping through a lot of data on Zenodo, and he was collecting all of this data and ingesting it into Nomad and trying to create this database of EBSD. And here, the idea is that you can then visualize it with this HDF5 web viewer that I was showing you before, so that you could really look through the data and really understand the data. And it's not just a fancy Dropbox. I think Zenodo is good for a lot of things, but for navigating data, it's probably not so good, right? Because you have to download the data and you have to figure out how to open it up and so on. And that's where Nomad can really help. And then on the calculation side, we continue to do a lot of work, right, on classic DFT, but also extending it to molecular dynamic excitations and quantum chemistry and so on. And then also these workflows that we'll talk more about in the afternoon. So yeah, in classic DFT here is some more examples where we really extend what are the things that show up, how are these visualizations doing, what do we support, and also extracting these workflows from this here. And I think a lot of the work has happened for example, in molecular dynamics. Here we have an example of some protein in solution, and it can really visualize this topology where we can navigate through the simulation box and really figure out what are the different parts of these calculations and so on. Yeah, so this is from the molecular dynamics, and then we have these workflows that I mentioned. So we have a bunch of different standard workflows that get picked up automatically, so that if you upload your GW with your DFT, we automatically pick up, okay, this is the DFT, this is the GW. We link those together and we create this workflow view so that you understand what is happening. But we also allow people to create these custom workflows, which has been quite a lot of development effort from our side, so that if you have some custom pipeline which you are running your calculations through, you can then define that in Nomad and you can set that up so that other users can understand what did you actually do in your calculation. And like I said, after lunch there will be a tutorial by Joe where I will help out a little bit as well, where we will go through some details about this and show you how you can do this. Then we have some examples from external collaborators. So this is from a lab at the Danish Technical University in Copenhagen, where they are doing materials discovery. So they are doing everything from simple DFT calculations to try to find suitable materials, to synthesizing these materials and then trying to figure out, do they work, do we get a single phase, what is happening, and so on. So here they are tracking all of it in NOMAD. So everything from the DFT up to the synthesis workflow, where they keep track of their targets here. This get links in the workflow view. We extract all the information about the synthesis steps, the different sources that are on at different times, and so on. And then we couple this with the characterization so that we can in the end figure out what were the things we did create, how does this compare to the materials that we expected to get, and so on and so forth. Another experimental example is from Lawrence Rettig groups, where they are working on dynamics of correlated materials at the FHI. And here it's an example of multidimensional photoemission spectroscopy, right? And the idea here is that they get quite large files which are directly mounted into NOMAD, like I was showing you before. And then they are using this north to actually analyze the data on NOMAD, but using custom software which was existing from before. So here they're using Igor Pro. I don't know if you or some people might be aware of this software. So it's an analysis software, it's a proprietary software, but if you have the license, you can run it on your NOMAD. So this is not just running on some PC and accessing the data over an API, but it's really running on the NOMAD server, accessible to everyone, and you with the data mounted, the heavy data mounted, so that you can run these analysis directly there. And it's all conforming to these Nexus standards, so that the resulting data that you get out after your analysis is then stored in NOMAD in a way where you can really share it, and it's made fair by design. I think I have time for one more example. So we have also the solar cell research that I mentioned a little bit before, that we have this database, but we are also working with people who are actively adding their solar cell data to NOMAD. So for example, here with perovskite solar cell, right, you have a lot of different layers which make up the solar cell, and we try to understand all of this in NOMAD so that you can visualize this. But we go beyond that, right? We want to, like I showed you before, understand the whole synthesis procedure. So we try to understand all of the different parameters. Here is a slot die coating process, and all of the different parameters that go into the slot die coating process, so that we can later on track all of these hundreds, if not thousands of solar cells that we make, based on the different batches, based on all of these different properties, so that we can try to understand what influences what inside of the solar cell and what makes a good solar cell and so on. And this solar cell is also a good example of a federated infrastructure in practice. So we have Oasises which are running with compatible plugins in Berlin at the High Sprint lab at HZB, also in Marburg and at KIT, and also in Erlangen at High-Ern. And all of these are then collaborating on a centralized Oasis where they can extract or exchange on all of this data, right? Yeah, so this brings us to 2025, to now, right? And NOMAD V2. And what we are working on right now is to optimize our graphical user interface, right? So that's the last step in the process before we are finalizing the first term of our proposal and move on to the second one. And here we are really trying to optimize how do users interact with NOMAD and really trying to tie the sack together. And then I just wanted to show a little bit of, it's maybe an explosion of a slide, but a little bit of our key metrics here from February in 2025. So we have almost 2,000 merge requests on our central software. So I think with this, I just want to highlight that this is really something where it requires a lot of development work to get to something like this. I tried in my PhD to write my own data management software, and this works as long as the student me is there, right? But then the moment they leave, if I talk to my old supervisor, he's like, no, that's forgotten, that's somewhere lying, right? So I think that's really the strength of NOMAD. We have all of these core developers which are working together to create the software and support the software. And it's really something where we should really come together and do this work together. And speaking of together, again, just want to make some advertisement for the NOMAD Discord forum. So if you haven't joined it already, I would highly recommend to join it. You can get help from us almost directly, but also from other users. So frequently there are other users that help people out and so on with these answers.
Then I would just like to acknowledge the support from NFDI, of course, and then I will leave you. I'll thank you a lot for listening, and then I'll leave you with this slide here. So if you scan this QR code, you get to an info page where you can get information about how to get to the Discord forum, how to get to the documentation, and a lot of these different things. So this is a good code. If you want to scan something, I would scan this one. Okay, with that, thank you for listening.